all this is based on entities. So there's a Matthias Palmer, which is a person. So there's RDF behind this. So we hide the linked data parts as much as possible. So the users from the agricultural universities, they don't even know that they're using a linked database platform. All the metadata they generate, here you have a small preview down here. You can scroll down as well. All the metadata is RDF. When they categorize their material, they actually use ontology terms that have been created in another European Union funded project. Here, data publication. There's an example of how it looks to create data catalogs. Here you have environmental data, statistical data. Here, Nobel Prize. Here we have your example here, and then just an example authority. So we take Nobel Prize as an example here. Data catalog may contain several data sets, and each data set can have distribution. So here we have two data sets. One is linked Nobel Prize, which contains all the Nobel Prize data, and here we have a subset which is only the laureates. And there are different entry points. That's what the distributions are good for. So we have we have the entry point for the linked data as one distribution, and we have a sparkle endpoint as a different distribution. And you can provide which format and so on. So this information is actually going to appear on the Swedish open data portal. And of course, you can attach as much metadata as you want. So depending on how much you know about your own data, you can express information. Just to show an example of the search, I mentioned that it is very useful to have terminologies and structured information to be able to actually find your stuff again. So here's a simple example where we have categorized material we have educational material, to go back to the cow example from before. And then we have a taxonomy term, which actually comes from the terminology module of Entryscape. So we just pretend that we have a taxonomy that consists of things related to genetics. So we choose, I want to have all educational material that relates to genomics, and it doesn't really matter whether it is links to external systems, whether it's concepts which don't really have any manifestation, or whether it's local files that I can download. And here I don't even have to enter any search term, because the terms up here, or the categories up there, are already enough to filter out the relevant resources. So I get a search result which actually match my criteria here. Here I can see that public information with a little globe here. This is actually a concept because I also found a taxonomy of rare genetic disorders. A video on TED. This is a link to an external system. So this is a very flexible way of actually managing information that is distributed. Either it's all in your organization, or it's on some other site. So you can just link and annotate with metadata. So I think it's just briefly about the platform. So if you have any questions, then you can either send an email to me or ask a question now. I don't know what it looks like time-wise now. Do we have time for questions?
Yes.
Yep.
Any questions? Everything is crispy and clear.
Then I have a question.
Yeah.
Any one of you have you experienced any data workflow that looked similar to what I was talking about now? Yeah, some people nodding. Not at all. Somebody says not at all.
it gets talked about a lot. I mean, there's a lot going on there which is interesting, and it comes up with the government open data stuff all the time. How you curate it, so yes, it's very much. What I'm interested in is that you're making a living out of it, which is good, because most people aren't.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yep.
Yeah. The business of individuality comes up a lot in my domain, and I'm thinking, do you find actually organisations are actually more similar than they think they are? So therefore, everyone wants to have his own cook in terms of their own vocabulary, whereas actually they'd be much better off. Tell them what. This is a good template for you. Why don't you force yourself into the template rather than fork it?
Yeah.
Do you think it's what's your opinion?
I think it's a possibility because I mean it depends also on the area. If it's a random small or middle-sized company, then they usually don't have very specific needs for describing their internal information. So you most of the time it's actually enough to reuse already existing vocabularies, for example, or metadata profiles. But I think linked data makes it really easy to just remove elements from metadata profiles that you. I mean, it's most. I come from the research area, and the first thing in research projects that usually happens is, let's create an application profile and describe it on 120 pages. So if you go from that direction into the more adaptive one, where you actually where you don't introduce an application profile from the beginning, where you just look at the demands that the organizations have, without creating an application profile, but just cherry picking from already existing vocabularies. I think that fulfills basically the same purpose, but makes a much easier impression on the organization. I think this will really improve the uptake of linked data in organizations of any size. So don't make it more complicated than it really is. So I think there's lots of information out there that can be reused, but there's very often this not invented here syndrome. Yeah.
I was going to ask if have you worked with any Swedish authorities?
Yes.
To help you publish sector information?
Yeah.
Which authority?
It's the what's that in English? The National Board for Health and Welfare, Socialstyrelsen. They actually have a really nice case for describing the national guidelines for diseases, and they work very much terminology based internally, and they currently use SharePoint. So we actually developed a proof of concept, and it's now they're actually looking now into switching over to linked data for publishing their national guidelines. And there was another data set which is called the first one nationella riktlinjer, and the other one was
Nationell informationsstruktur.
what did I yeah, försäkringsmedicinskt beslutsstöd. So it was the decision support for their own officers, and that's a case where it would make very much sense to actually to model this as linked data, not only to be able to use it internally to make it more effective, to actually find your stuff, to maintain your stuff, because now it's very much tabular based. So there are spreadsheets with terminologies, and this is a very cumbersome set of managing terminologies. So and also not only for internal use but also for publication, because I think there are lots of organizations that actually develop medical systems that would really benefit from being able to reuse such data in a more effective way.
I think so too. I mean, they've spent quite a lot of time in the government agencies covering healthcare system without publishing a proper standard saying, well, this is the entity standard and the things we actually do in taking care of healthcare, which is, I mean, they have done the modeling, but not publishing in a machine readable way, which means that you can't use it. It's just a paper product, which is very stupid, if you ask me, but I'm just a researcher. It's just waste of my tax money.
And also complement that we're working with Skolverket, National
School Authority,
to provide guides for how to teach in linked open data.
Styrdokument, svenska styrdokument.
Ja.
För skolan kommer att publiceras som länkade data. We were enough to question.
I have a question. How much they do more sell the products like the people are using themselves, or the other selling you as a consultant?
That's a very good question, because we're really so far it has been a lot of consulting work, which was mostly about modeling, because that's what we did during our work in research. So we're basically experts in data modeling, but we want to make this process much easier through Entryscape. So you don't have to have an expert that develops yet another proprietary system for your organization. You should be able to. Entryscape is open source, by the way. You should be able to use a more or less standard platform, and you should be able to use this with minor modifications in your organization. And the important thing is probably the easy access to already existing information, how to package this in easy to use interfaces, user interfaces, because that's probably the main problem. The user interfaces that we have seen so far were really dedicated towards the more technical users, technical consultants. Yeah.
So a follow-up to the last thing you said there with the interfaces. It says you have a possibility to use your API.
Yeah.
I was wondering how many of your customers today have chosen to sort of find a way to integrate this tagging and using your product as a integrated part of their ordinary sort of system. And have you seen any big differences in the success if you have managed to do a nice integration so it sort of becomes a part of their work instead of having to do this as like a separate process?
So far, we're in the middle of modularizing Entryscape, because before we had with some different frameworks, and now we make everything user-friendly, and we package this into one product, Entryscape, with different modules depending on what you need in your organization. So currently we don't have any organization that actually uses the API feature, because that's a very new feature, and we haven't really had time to actually use this in an organization. But I think one of the keys will be the integratability into already existing systems, because otherwise it will be very costly to actually adapt the organization into our workflows. But there are also lots of organizations that actually start from scratch. If you had a spreadsheet-based workflow before, then you probably don't want to integrate an API into Excel, even though you probably can do it somehow, but you don't really want to do this. And then you have the possibility of actually introducing a new data-based workflow from the beginning as well. But it's basically up to you if you want to use.
I will stop here. It's very interesting. We will have further conversations with Matthias in the panel discussion in the end of the day.
Hannes, that's what.
Hannes, there's Matthias. Sorry, Hannes, and also in the social event going to Radisson for those who are able to do so. So I'm very pleased to have you here, Hannes. Thank you. And now we're up and running, working live.